All right, this is to the church of Smyrna. This is some of the ruins of the city. This city is one of the largest cities in Turkey. Today it's called Izmir, which is Turkish for Smyrna. So it has the same name, but it's Muslim. This is all Muslim land now. It is the third largest city in Turkey, major exporter of tobacco, grapes, figs, cotton, olives. Smyrna means myrrh. Myrrh. What what did the three wise men or the wise men? We don't know that there were three. What did they bring to Jesus? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Th- This town grew and processed myrrh, which is, yeah, it's a bitter, pleasant smelling perfume made from the resin of trees that grew in the area. It's commonly used for embalming. So, in one sense, you could say the name of this city is like formaldehyde. It's the city the name speaks of death. Smyrna to this day possesses an excellent harbor. If you go back to the map, you'll see it's like a peninsula and it's got harbor on either side. It's a good, yeah. First inhabited about 3000 BC. This is the birthplace of Homer. If you remember the Iliad and the Odyssey, very famous Greek poet. You probably read some of his stuff in grade school, high school. It was very common at some point in reading. You would read either the Iliad or the Odyssey. Some Smyrna was destroyed and laid waste for 300 years until Alexander the Great come along, and he ordered one of his generals to rebuild the city. And history records in the 4th century, Alexander, in response to a dream, ordered Lysimachus, one of his 4 generals, to build a strong, well-planned city, the most beautiful city in Ionia. It became known as the flower of Ionia and prospered into one of the greatest then cities in the then known world.
To the angel of the churches in Spirit, right, the word of the first and the last, who died and came to life. I know your tribulation and your poverty, but you are rich, and the splendor of those who say that they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw stones into you freely, that you may be tested, and for 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life.
What do you think Jesus is saying in those 3 verses?
If you can go through trouble, it's gonna be okay.
The first thing, let's see. Okay. First thing in the verse 2:8. Don't go back. Verse 2:8, to the angel of the church, write the words of the first and the last who died and came to life. This is pulled from the first chapter of Revelations, but why might he introduce himself as, hey, I'm the one that died and came back to life? You know, think about it. He's introducing, hey, I've been where you're fixing to go. This church is under severe persecution, and it's about to get worse. They are being persecuted and killed for the name of Jesus. Think about, as I go over this next thing, what might life have been like for the believer in 95 AD? Build up to what was going on. Some history of the city.
What, the time of Paul, what would be his time?
About 50 to 60 AD, roughly.
That was his ministry time?
Yeah.
So a lot of things changed after Paul.
Well, Paul he warned Ephesus once he left, there were going to be false sheep both come in from outside and rise up among you.
I'm just here thinking, the letter starts off, Gideon on the surface out of prison, and, you know, you thought you were doing everything right, now, you just kind of didn't want it.
Well,
You know, my mind would be going all over the place at that time.
well, like I said, think about this. This city and Pergamos were part of a kingdom. I can't remember the name of the kingdom, but in 197, 195 BC, and remember in BC it counts backwards. You're counting down to year one. There is no year zero. Another discussion. But this city severed its ties with Pergamum and decided to align itself with Rome. And this is during the time of some of the Punic Wars between Rome and Carthage. So they recognized Rome as a growing power and wanted to be aligned. They fell in love with Rome. They built a temple to Dea Roma. They literally, Dea Roma is the god of Rome. They personified Rome as a goddess. The town was literally raised in a culture of worshiping Rome. 133 BC, the last king of the area, King Atlas III, died without an heir. He left instructions in his will for the entire kingdom to be passed to Rome. In 26 AD, this town, now about 26 BC, 25, let's see. Yeah, you have Rome, the Republic, becomes Rome, the dictatorship, with the events of Julius Caesar. So during this time period, Rome ceases being a republic, kind of the government we're supposed to have, and becomes a dictatorship. Well, in 26 AD, they build a temple to Caesar Tiberius. So they start worshiping the leader of Rome. Other temples soon followed, and I could not get dates nailed for the other temples. Going past the date of this letter, one of the most famous early martyrs in the church was Polycarp. He's a disciple of John.
Like John the Baptist?
No, John that wrote this letter.
Oh, that makes sense.
He was personally trained by John, and the dates bounce from 154 to 160, but he was burned at the stake for his faith. And he's famously said, 86 years I have gave to my Lord, and he's never did me wrong. I'm not abandoning him now. Let the fires burn. This city, 178 and 180, was destroyed by an earthquake, and Emperor Marcus Aurelius rebuilt the city. These are probably some of his most devoted followers in this city. In this city, you were required to go once a year to the temple, throw a pinch of incense in the altar, and proclaim that Caesar is Lord. Kaiser Curios. When you did this, you would be given a certificate, like a little license or plate, and you were free to do business in the town, whatever. Rome did not care what god or multitude of gods you worshiped, but by this time, Caesar is Lord. Caesar is above your other gods, even, in this town being the heart of emperor worship, this was a requirement.
Yeah, it's still that way today in a lot of countries
It,
like China.
it
They
is.
worship, basically they worship their president.
You could make a very good parallel to China. You could make a very good parallel to communist Russia, about any communist country. The state is trying to replace God. The state is God in those countries.
Right. And so if you have a religion come in like Christianity, see, they don't like God.
You could also probably say Muslim countries, but your Islam Muhammad is not your God, but he's looked at as your God, but you don't dare call him God. That's a whole nother subject, but Islam does what it denies it does, and don't you dare say it does what it denies. This was a formality in this town. You think about it. If you have this option, we could even see this option a couple years ago if you think about this. You go to the temple and participate in the yearly thing. You're free to worship as you please. You have the support of the town behind you. Have the support of your other family members that have done this. It's good for business. You're free to walk in the business, participate. People will buy from you. And ultimately, you'll avoid being burned at the stake. But if you refuse to take this, or to go to the temple and throw the little pinch in the altar, you're seen as a threat to Rome. Later on, and they were building into this, the original atheists were the Christians, because the Romans believed in a multitude of gods and the Christians did not. Atheist means I don't believe in your gods. Today it means I don't believe in a God. Ostracized by even your own family. Come on, just go down there to get this. Go down there and take this. Go down. All you got to do is you don't even have to believe it. Just go through the motions and you'll be fine.
Just accept it.
Yes.
That's basically, what, you think of the Russian Orthodox Christian Church, which is run by the government and overseen by the government. So really, it's okay to go and worship, but you had to do it in a certain way, like
Or the Chinese church.
Pentecostal is not allowed in Russia.
In the Chinese church, you can have the state-run church, but it doesn't say Jesus is Lord. It says the state is Lord, and it tries to replace the worship of Jesus with the worship of the state.
In other words, the church is for the country.
Yeah. This happened in Germany too. Your above ground churches, your Nazi Christians, which you go to look for a book, Bonhoeffer, when it's going through his life and explaining what's going on, it's eye opening reading that. If you like to read, you will spend some time thinking about what was going on in Germany. But if you got a business, nobody's going to do any business with you. So where's your income? And ultimately, like I said, it could cost you your life. And this happened at times.
That's kind of what it's getting over here now. And it's slowly, every day you can see it's getting worse and worse. If you're a Christian, they don't, they may not want to have, you might have a hard time finding a job.
Yeah. And think about what we've been through the last 3 years, which is the number one thing that was on my mind when I was going back through this is the last 3 years. It didn't work, but we've been in this situation and felt the push from our own churches and watched churches get divided up over just participate in what.
They have to accept. One of the, I noticed, my sister-in-law from California that came over here, she really believes like the church should accept all these changes, and it should be like a living church, in other words, it accepts the changes.
She's very progressive. Wait till we get to the next church and the next one.
You gotta change, you just
Now,
holding up everything.
there was one group to begin with that was exempt from all this, and that was the Jews. Now, as we progress, the Christianity to begin with was looked at as a sect of Judaism. The Romans didn't know what to make out of it. But the Jews kept trying to push the Christians out. And at Nero, he found that the Christians were a convenient excuse for things. And by the fall of the temple, the Jews were falling a little bit out of favor. And as this progresses, the Christians ultimately get blamed for a lot of things. I covered, I don't know if I got that. This church thinks they're poor. And I mean, from a worldly standpoint, they are poor. But Jesus says, you're rich. And it may be in the verse coming up. Finding with this recording, I can't go back and look.
It was in the verse that he read.
So, and from a worldly standpoint, I mean, if you, I don't know, sell textile or fabric or whatever, nobody's going to buy your stuff because you haven't participated. You may even be barred from opening your shop. So these people don't have a lot, but spiritually they are very rich.
But now, if they're not supposed to buy, as one did, it didn't say that, I was wondering.
I think it'll get more into that in the next, but
Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested, and for 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life.
once again, what's he saying to them? Buckle up. Maybe this is why, as I pointed out, he started the letter reminding them that he was dead and is alive. Basically, he's been where these people are about to go. And he is the controller of the resurrection. He holds the keys of death. His resurrection should be reassurance that he can resurrect you. If you wind up dying due to this town, maybe the next verse, the second death will have no effect on you. I think that's the next verse.
But I say, as a faithful message, be faithful. And trust me. I mean, you're going to suffer, it's going to be fine.
Well, think about, I'm trying to build up how much pressure they were on from society, culture, I mean, we have this pressure today, love is love. I mean,
They will be tested for time, but they're overcoming. You will have tribulations. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life.
but I think about the book of Job. Job was tested. All his friends got around him and said, "You've sinned. You've done. This is why this is happening." They haven't done anything wrong. They're being persecuted for making a stand.
Just like and the church.
Well, take the church today. I mean, look at John MacArthur's church. All his buddies that he thought were his buddies, when he opened his doors with what we just had, they started turning on him. How dare you open your doors? How dare you provide a place for your people? How dare you minister to those in need? That was John MacArthur's argument.
But the state wanted to control everything, so they wanted you.
That was out in California. The 10 days here, it's a mystery. It most definitely points to a specific 10 days that Smyrna went through. Maybe it was like a crystal novel, Night of the Broken Glass, and which is, if y'all don't know, that's the night that the Nazis went into the Jewish neighborhoods and just busted and destroyed everything. There are some commentators that think that this refers to 10, and there are 10 emperors that were really bad in persecuting the church between this and Constantine, but I kind of think it's pushing the text a little hard, personally.
Do as near and hear what the Spirit says to the church. The one who conquers will not be hurt with the second or the final second.
I think I've already kind of went over that. It's the first and the last. He was dead and he is risen. Don't be afraid of it. I got this. The second death you won't have to worry about. It's not going to affect you if you die for my name. But the good things, the commendation, patience and suffering, abject poverty yet rich. They're enduring slander, persecution, and they're holding on to the death. Did you find anything he said they did wrong? This is one of two churches in this that had nothing bad said about them. This church probably felt like they were a failure under this much pressure, that God couldn't be with us or we wouldn't be going through this. And he's literally saying, just hold on. I'm proud of you. We see through a glass darkly. We don't see the witness. These people are an example to what's going on around them.
Well, I mean, even in some ways, we start going through something does not necessarily mean we've done something wrong, but we don't want to see the good that we have done that we've done.
Yeah.
We just want to see, oh, I'm under all this pressure. Oh, it's all my fault.
The exhortation, do not be afraid. And he's warning them, and he's promising that if they go through this, they will not have to worry about second death, and that they will receive a crown. There are several crowns. I think in one of these I went through the crowns, but these are rewards you were given for being faithful. There's a crown for longing for Christ to return. There's a crown for suffering. You know, Paul even talks about there's a crown laid up for me. Okay. In the historic, uh, the fourth viewpoint, the historic, this is the church age about 102. Constantine's making the Christianity legal. This church, during this time, the church was persecuted intensely and it would go through waves. So you might have an emperor that just kind of let things be, and the next emperor would come along and he would be hard on the Christians all over Rome's back. Something bad would happen and they would blame it on the Christians because they weren't worshiping the gods, and the gods were judging them. Domitian is the one that banished John to this island, so you start to see these things building. And that's that. Here, the Christians became a convenient scapegoat. This builds up to Constantine, I think it's 313, his edict of toleration. And Constantine did not make Christianity the state religion, he made it legal. The emperor, two after him, made it the state religion. But Constantine just, the story is he had a dream. They were in the Civil War, which Roman history, every time an emperor dies, the leading generals wind up roughly in a civil war over who's going to take over. Constantine was outnumbered. He had a dream that had a big cross in the sky and a voice that told him to conquer in this sign. So he had all his soldiers paint crosses on their shields, and he won the battle. And scholars argue whether he was really converted or he knew there were a lot of secret Christians in his army and he knew this would motivate them. And they argue that. I mean, there is a lot of ink spilled on that argument. So, a few questions. Are you willing to walk in the temple and throw a pinch of incense? Are you willing to give up if it costs you everything to follow Jesus? Are you willing to? Because it costs these people everything. Are you willing to sacrifice everything you have for your faith? I mean, just sit there and ponder your money, because we could be right over the cusp of being in these shoes, what I call the true believer. And as this goes on, I will say one of the books I'm pulling from is Footsteps of the Messiah, and Arnold Frukenbaum. There's like two groups in the churches from this point forward. It really empathizes. There's like what it calls the true believer, and then these others. In this church, there ain't no these others because these others fled. They can't handle persecution. They're not sold out, or they're the ones that are walking through the temple and then going, "Hey man, all you got to do, you don't have to believe, just throw it in there, and you can. They'll leave you alone." And I think we've covered how the letter relates to today. You think? If Jesus knew this was coming, why didn't he pull them out of this? Now, you talk about Carl believing we're going to be pulled out before anything bad happens. Well, these people weren't. In fact, hmm? What do you mean?
Well, because you're an overcomer if you.
Oh, I mean,
I mean,
his friend Carl believes we're not going to suffer anything. We're just going to sit in our easy rocking chair and then. Yeah, I'm talking about on this earth. But in some some viewpoints in the church today, the American church, we've lost sight of what it feels like to be persecuted, and we have very much have an American. We don't see what Christians go through in the Muslim countries in China, most churches, and we believe that God would never do something or allow this to happen. He would never allow what happened to Job, but he did. That's what I'm getting at.
But Job was better off than me.
Yes, but he had to go through losing everything. These people will be better off in the end, but Jesus did not sidestep them from going through this. That's what I'm getting at.
Well, I think people worry more about what they're going to eat, having a roof over their head. I think they put that ahead of everything else and stuff. And that's not really important.
Yeah,
I mean, it is important, but it's not, because God's going to take care of you.
yeah.
I mean, it's all about killing the flesh, desires of the flesh. Right?
In this case, this church is having to 100% depend on Jesus.
But see, all they can do is kill your flesh. That's all they can do.
They
can't
can't
kill
hurt.
your soul.
They can't kill your spirit. And this last one, do you take comfort in any of this when you look at what the church may be facing in the future? He's been there. Go back to the Gospels. He was beaten. His beard was pulled out. They drove nails through him. They mocked him. They made fun of him. They killed him. He's been in the worst place that we could ever go and came out of it. And he controls Hades, death.
I believe